Okay, so it's 2 o'clock now. I think we should get started. It looks like everyone's joining nicely. So my name is Roberta Beattie. I'm from the Digital Culture Network and I'm the Digital Accessibility Tech Champion. I'm a middle-aged woman with blonde hair and a green cardigan. And I'm going to be doing some housekeeping before I introduce our guest for today, who is Oliver. So before we get started, the webinar today should last around an hour, and we'll have lots of time for some Q&A at the end. You've got the button at the bottom for closed captions, and there's also BSL interpretation available. I wanted to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and it will be available on the website alongside any additional resources within 7 days. So feel free to say hello in the chat and introduce yourself, and do use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions that come to you, and we'll answer them at the end of the session. And feel free to use the react buttons as well, because they're quite fun. I'll pass you over now to Oliver from StageText, who's going to be running the session today. Thanks for coming today, Oliver.
Hi, thanks, Roberta. So yes, my name is Oliver, and I am from StageText. I can get my slides to work. So this webinar is everything you ever wanted to know about subtitling, but were afraid to ask. So just a quick bit of background on StageText. StageText was founded in the year 2000 by 3 people with hearing loss. They set out to advocate and support captioning in theatre. They felt that they couldn't really enjoy the theatre. Since then, it's grown to include talks and tours in museums and galleries, and now digital, which is what I've been managing. And our overall mission is to supply access to the arts for deaf, and hard of hearing people through subtitling and captioning. As for myself, I'm deaf. I have been since birth. So I've been a long time user of subtitles and captions at StageText, even before I joined. So I think I've got quite a lot to say about this. Just to describe myself, I'm a white person with curly brown hair, and I've got circular glasses, wearing a white t-shirt with a black V-neck jumper on top. So this is what we're going to be covering today. We've got digital subtitling tips and best practice, frequently asked questions, and then a Q&A at the end. So if you've got any questions, put them in that Q&A and we can have a good old chat. So in terms of who this webinar is for, this is aimed at people who are already involved in subtitling. So that might be people who are creating subtitling in-house. It might be people who are booking subtitlers, professional subtitlers for content, or it might be people who are reviewing subtitles created by either external or internal subtitlers. But also, anyone who's curious about subtitling is also welcome. I'm not going to kick you out if you haven't, if you're not the right kind of person. So first up, digital subtitling tips and best practice. In order to make your subtitles as effective as possible, you first need to understand what they do and how they work. So I'm going to give you a very brief single slide explanation of hearing and what subtitles do. On the screen is an audiology graph. It looks daunting and confusing if you're not used to it, but I've seen hundreds of these through my life, and I'm going to walk you through it. This particular example shows the average hearing of someone with hearing loss, someone who is deaf, deafened, or hard of hearing. The top axis, the x-axis, shows the frequency. So that's how high or low pitch a sound might be. The side axis, the y-axis, shows the volume. So that's how quiet or loud something might be. So this maps out the area of sound. So every sound has a particular frequency, whether it's low pitch or high pitch, and a particular volume, whether it's quiet or loud. So some examples we've got on the screen are an airplane, which is high pitch and loud, or a lorry, which is low pitch and loud, some leaves rustling, which is high pitch and quiet. Any sound you can imagine fits somewhere on this graph. Across the kind of middle section, you've got this blue sort of boomerang shaped area, a big blob. And this blue blob represents human speech. So human speech is made up of what's called phonemes. And all speech sounds are within this area. So that sounds like d, m, p, r. These are all phonemes. And they've got a variety of pitches and volume, the same as sound. So that's just an interesting thing to kind of note. It's common sense, but also not something we really think about. Human speech isn't uniform. Unless you've got a really monotone voice, most people's speech fits in a range of pitches and volumes. You've got this red and blue line that creates this kind of very slanted L shape across the graph. Now, what these lines are the result of a hearing test. So when you go to an audiologist and you test your hearing, what you do is you wear a set of headphones and they'll play a sound in one ear at certain frequencies and at certain volumes. They'll start off very loud and get quieter with the same pitch. Every time that you hear the sound, you press a button that says, yes, I heard that. And so they go quieter and quieter until you don't hear it anymore. So then what they find is they find the threshold of what you are hearing. And so they do that across all the different frequencies so that they can then say, right, across all the sounds, this is what this person can hear. They map out that threshold of your hearing. In this case, the red line and blue line mean the right ear and the left ear, but they're the same in this example, so that's not really important. But you do get people who have very distinct differences. So some people might be completely deaf in one ear, so they'd have a red line that's completely along the top and a blue line that's just absolutely fine. Now, you'll notice, looking at this graph, that this line, this threshold of hearing, cuts across the area of human speech. It cuts across that blue blob. It's not a case when someone is deaf that everything is simply quieter, but rather parts of the word are quieter. So a word like France or thanks, because the F's and the S's aren't heard, become arms or ang. And so you get these bits of words that are missing. And so what subtitles do is subtitles fill in those gaps. They fill in those parts of words that that person isn't hearing, the bits that are in the area of hearing loss, which is the gray section on screen. For most people, babies will have a line that's just completely along the top. They can hear everything. Over time, it will start to drop down. Most people by the age of 70 will have a graph like this. It is found that the higher frequencies tend to go more and sooner. I don't know why, but that's just what it is. So they do tend to look like this on average. So yes, just really reinforcing the idea that it's not just about turning volume up. I can't tell you the number of times when I've said to people, can you turn the subtitles on? And they said, oh, can we just turn it up? It doesn't help. If you've got a guitar and one of the strings break, turning it up to 11 doesn't fill in that strain. That's what subtitles do. So when you're creating subtitles, keep that in mind. When you're thinking, how do you approach this sound? Are you effectively filling in the gaps to allow your audience to understand the sound? That's quite complicated to take in all at once. If you do have any questions about it, put it in the Q&A and we'll go over it at the end. But for now, I'm assuming that you've all understood that. So we'll move on to the next bit. So starting right at the beginning of creating your subtitles is actually creating your video content. One thing that's always good to bear in mind is keeping a subtitle safe zone clear at the bottom of your video, so that when you put the subtitles in, they don't cover up anything. Ideally, you want this to be the bottom 20% of your screen. or 1/5 of the screen. And you want to keep it in a consistent location. The bottom of the screen is easiest for lip reading because if you've got kind of a headshot, the subtitles are underneath the mouth. So it's easier for someone who's lip reading to go from the mouth to the subtitles. Whereas if it's above their head, you've got to go past their entire face. It's a much further distance to go. And if you're going to have them jumping around, then people have to be hunting for them. They don't know where they're going to be. So it's best to have them at the bottom and consistently at the bottom. Don't jump all over the place. When you're filming headshots, aim for the clavicle, which is this bit on the collarbone. Aim for that to be in that subtitle safe zone. And then the rest of the head will be kind of framed properly. So again, the subtitles just fit underneath their chin. And if you're adding any writing to your video, so if you've got titles, image captions, names, make sure that they sit above this zone so that, again, the subtitles don't cover up. We've got an example on the screen. So you can see we've got the subtitles at the bottom, and then we've got this person's name and title above the subtitles. So you don't need to worry about things overlaying. And this is why it's important to think about subtitles from the very beginning of your creation process. Don't just add it on at the end. Make sure that everyone throughout the process knows there's going to be subtitles on this. Make sure the filmographer with the camera knows, keep that section clear. Make sure the editor knows, keep that section clear. If everybody's talking about them, if everybody's thinking about them, then it just saves so much trouble and it fits in seamlessly. You always want to remember your grammar. This is basic English. We've got an example on screen which shows the importance of having a space in the right area. You can use the same words with different spaces to say you're either looking for one night stand or a one night stand, which will get you some very different responses. So yes, it's important that the grammar in the subtitles is correct. Similarly, punctuation is the difference between let's eat grandma and let's eat grandma. So again, make sure that it's correct. And make sure the subtitles are accurate to the audio. If what they're saying doesn't make grammatical sense, subtitle it incorrectly in line with what they're saying. Whenever subtitles don't match what the sound is, it creates a cognitive dissonance between what people are hearing and what people are reading. And that actually takes them out of the video and out of the experience. And then they're not thinking about the story, the content that you're presenting to them. They're thinking about, wait, what did that say? References. So having reference material saves a lot of time when it comes to the spelling of names, jargon, all these kind of things. So where possible, try and collect information that will be useful during that filming and editing. So again, it's important to think about it from the start. If there's a script, get a copy of the text, or if there's presentation notes, speaker names, specialist jargon, any unusual words, get this all noted down during the filming. If there's any pieces that are read out or quoted from, get a hold of that piece. We once recently did a video of an author and they read out an unpublished piece that they'd drafted, but had never gone out anywhere. And so we had a bit of a tough time trying to get hold of that because it was a fantasy author. So there was lots of unusual spellings, which have no real world spellings to base off. So it was quite important that we had a copy of that text. If anyone said anything in another language, so if you film a discussion with, let's say, an Italian artist and they say some Italian phrase, it's much easier to ask them at the time of filming, what did you say? Please, can you write it down? Rather than 3 months down the line saying, oh, we're trying to subtitle this, phone them up. Can you remember what you said? Because they've moved on, they've got another project. So write it down at the time. Some more things to include: if you're using any music, take a note of the song that's being used during the production. So this is during the editing process, maybe. If you're adding a song on, make sure you know what is the name of that song, what is the artist of that song. Otherwise, if you are using music, you should have the rights to the music, so there should be some sort of paper trail. But when you're collecting these references, remember that subtitles are a visual soundtrack. They should be a factual representation of the sound, not interpretive or descriptive. There's no need to describe actions, such as the example on the screen. I'm just going to let the interpreter switch over 1 second. Great. So on the screen, we've got a picture of David Tennant as the Doctor with the subtitle saying, "Hair trembles with emotion." I'm not going to ask anyone to volunteer to imitate what they think the sound of hair trembling with emotion might be, because there isn't one. There's no need to describe these kind of things. This is probably a meme, but I have seen this kind of thing before. And as a viewer, it's annoying and patronizing. And the last thing you want is to annoy and patronize your viewers. So remember, subtitles should be as factual and verbatim as possible, i.e. as close as possible to what has actually been said. And so once again, all of this highlights the importance of considering subtitling in advance, because it means that you can subtitle things faster. You're not having to do research. You're not having to query things with the video maker, the people in the video. So line breaks and short sentences. When it comes to line lengths and line breaks, you want a maximum of 2 lines. You should never run into 3 lines. That's too much text. And it's better to have 2 short lines rather than 1 long one. And the reason for this is that, as we said earlier, subtitles fill in the gaps. People aren't reading them like prose. It's not like reading a book. It's more like you're watching a video, and when you miss a bit, you glance down at the subtitle to find that bit that you need, and then you look back up at the video. So when you have 2 short lines, it's much easier to see the whole thing in one glance. Whereas in 1 long line, you've got to skim through the whole line to find it. So when it comes to finding those line breaks, you want to find a natural place within the sentence where each line is still kind of conceptually self-contained. So we've got an example on the screen. If I read it as 1 line, it's actually quite calm, look at the clouds. And 2 lines, it's actually quite calm, look at the clouds. The break there doesn't change the meaning of the sentence. And this is one of those things that is a bit tricky to find, but it just takes practice. So just do it, read out the lines, see, does it still make sense? You also want an entire subtitle to be, as much as possible, a contained sentence. You don't want to end either line with words like and or with, words that indicate there's something else coming afterwards, because then the person reading is looking for what's the next bit. And again, if they're scanning and filling in the bits, when the sentence isn't contained, there's context that might be missed on the next subtitle. So keep it short, 2 lines, and each individual subtitle should be a logical sentence. When you've got 2 people speaking, if they're on screen, you use a dash to show each person's line. You don't need to name them, and this is because the viewer can lip read the speakers, and so they can pair up who said what line. However, if they're off screen, then you would need to name them. And this is because a hearing person might be able to identify by their voice who is speaking, but a deaf person might not. So you need to give the name to say, this voice has spoken this line. If you've got 2 people speaking off screen, you use dashes as well. When it comes to sound effects, this is one of the things that really trips people up, because there's a lot of nuance here. So with sound effects, if a sound effect is an evident sound from a visual cue on the screen, that is to say, if you see something happening on screen and that produces a sound which is the expected sound, you don't need to subtitle it. So for example, if you've got a clock that, hits 12 and then it got the bell ringing, you don't need to subtitle that the bell is ringing. Your viewer can see that what is happening and will assume that that is producing the expected sound. So again, if you do, that becomes kind of patronizing. Like, you're saying, oh, you don't know what this sounds like, I'll tell you. The nuance is that if it's not evident, then you do need to subtitle it. So if, with the clock example, the clock strikes 12, and instead of the bell ringing, you've got a clown car honking, then you would need to subtitle it, because how would your viewer know that that's the sound that's being made? And also, if the sound is off screen, then they can't see the source of it, so they can't tell that it's producing the sound. So in that case, you would subtitle it. When it comes to the description, you want to keep it as factual and brief as possible. So on screen, we've got an example where it's dark, there's the noise of crickets, and the subtitle says crickets singing. And that's generally the format that you want it in. You want the object producing the sound and what it's doing to produce the sound. So ball squeaking or ball bouncing, cricket singing. You don't want to have crickets singing in the night to attract mates in the forest. Too long. And also, that's adding extra information that is not part of the sound. That's part of the kind of the concept that you can see from it. So that's something to bear in mind. Keep it simple, keep it factual, and don't add anything that is not in that sound. All you're doing is describing the sound. When you've got music, there's another nuance here. If it's background music where the song and the lyrics aren't the main focus of the scene, then what you do is you have the song name followed by the artist in square brackets, and you can have the musical notes on either side. And in terms of putting the musical notes in subtitles, you can just go on Google and search like musical note emoji and paste it in, it'll be fine. And this is another reason why it's important to think about subtitles through the process. When you're editing, make note of these names, these artist names and these song names. If you don't know it, you can use Shazam, which is an app that can listen to music and tell you who the artist and song name is. If it's a song that's not well known, you might be better off describing the music. So a song like Take That or Lady Gaga, Janet Jackson, people know who that is. But if it's, some indie band that's produced one CD and got 20 followers on SoundCloud, people aren't going to know what the song is. So in that case, you want to describe the music. And the description of music, again, is factual. Describe the instrument, describe the pacing. Emotion is an interpretation. So avoid emotional descriptions of the music. And it is really important that you do describe music. If you've got a very quick space where there's both dialogue and music, prioritize the dialogue. But when you have got space, put the music in. And it's important to let people know because they might have tinnitus, which sounds similar to the music. So tinnitus is a ringing in the ear. It can come and go, or it can be consistent. But you need to let people know if what they're hearing is the tinnitus or the music. But also, if somebody is completely deaf, then they'll have no indication whatsoever that there's any music playing. I had a colleague who was completely deaf, and she and her friend wanted to do the mannequin challenge, which was an online trend a few years ago. And basically, you have a video panning across a tableau, a scene of people kind of frozen in position. And they did this video and they put it online, and everybody was laughing at them because what they didn't know was that when you've got a mannequin challenge video, there's supposed to be music playing in the background. So they hadn't put music on. So it was just a video of them standing still without the music. So yes, let people know that there's music playing. If you are doing a musical, or a music video or a concert, something where the lyrics are important, then just giving the name and the artist is not useful. In these cases, you want to subtitle the lyrics. And you subtitle it the same as speech, dashes if there's multiple singers, a name if they're off screen. But you do need to indicate that the words are being sung. And so you use a music note. So again, you pick this off of Google and you use the music note like quotation marks. So you have them at the start of each line being sung and at the end of the last line. So you don't have it at the end of every line, only the last line. So it's almost like a full stop at the end of the song to say it's finished now. But otherwise, it's all the same rules as normal. Now, a big question that comes up often when we're talking about subtitles is whether or not we should use AI subtitles. Obviously, it's moved ahead massively in the past few years, and I'm sure it will continue to move ahead in the past few years. But the question always is, can you be certain that AI subtitles will be reliably 100% accurate and accessible in the same way that human-generated subtitles are? Personally, I cannot currently be certain. There's too much extra formatting, like the dashes for multiple speakers, the names for off-screen speakers, sound descriptions, all of that, which currently, may do one day, but currently AI does not include that. So currently, I would say that AI is not reliable for accessible subtitles. And yet, a lot of people do turn to them. And it's a cost question, which I do understand. My answer to that would be to say, well, you wouldn't use an unreliable mic that often cut out to capture audio, or a camera that sometimes flickered or glitched. So why would you use subtitles that are not reliable? So we recommend prepared human subtitles for the level of accuracy they provide, because it's that accuracy and those access elements that makes it accessible. It's that makes sure that viewers can engage with your content and not miss anything. So a quick recap of all of that, the top tips. So keep it verbatim, keep it word for word accurate, keep it consistent. It's no good having sporadic subtitles. You want to make sure that you are reliable to your viewer, to your audience, so that they'll follow, subscribe, come to join the show, whatever it is that you're funneling them towards. If you're not consistent, they won't be sure. Plan ahead. Make sure you write out all the information that you need as it's coming up to make it easier for yourself when you're subtitling. Grammar. Keep the grammar correct and accurate to what's being said. Punctuation, keep the punctuation accurate. Subtitle safe zone, keep that bottom 20% of the screen free. A maximum of 2 lines. Dashes to show 2 people speaking. Names for indicating off-screen speakers. Don't subtitle evident sound effects, but subtitle unexpected sound effects. Subtitle sound effects caused by something off screen. When it comes to the music, it's the song and the artist in square brackets, unless you're subtitling the lyrics, in which case you use a musical note. And you use a musical note like quotation marks. That's a lot to take in. We do have a free resource on the StageText website, which I think will probably also be coming out to you, which has a list of all these best practice standards, so do make use of that. Okay, so we're going to go on now to frequently asked questions. I believe there's 15 of these. So these are questions that I get asked a lot, Roberta's been asked, so we thought we'd just put them straight in. So, number 1, what is the difference between closed captions and open captions? So, this is a language thing. Often people use the word closed caption to refer to all sorts of subtitles, but they actually describe something very specific. Open captions are captions or subtitles that are always on display. So, whether that's part of the video, whether it's on a screen that the whole audience can see, it is open to the entire audience. That's why it's called open captions. It's not turned on by each individual viewer. The downside of this is that you can only have one set of open captions in one location. So like our caption that we do in theatre, we've got screens that go on the side of the stage and they display open captions so that all the audience can see them, but it's only in one language. The benefit of this is that it's an equal experience to everyone. For me as a theatre goer, I can go to the theatre and I can sit down next to my friend who is a hearing person, and we can both see the captions, we can both enjoy the show, and I'm not doing anything different. Closed captions refer to subtitles which are turned on by the viewer. So that will be subtitled on a personal device or on YouTube, Netflix. The subtitle that you turn on is for you specifically. When I'm watching the latest program on Netflix and I turn on the subtitles, that doesn't turn it on for anyone else who's also watching the show. It's only for me. So it's closed to that user, which is why it's called closed captions. The benefit of this is that you can have multiple versions of closed captions for the same video, and the user gets to choose which version they like. So this is good if you've got multiple languages that you want to subtitle in. So you might see on YouTube, you've got a video with lots of different types of subtitles, which is for translation. The downside is that there's extra steps required of the user, and it requires them to proactively seek out subtitles, which is fine if you are a regular subtitle user. But if you're someone who kind of still, just about starting to lose their hearing and doesn't really want to think about, oh, I need subtitles now, then they're missing out. So what about subtitles, like the word subtitles? Is that different from closed captions? And the answer is not really. It's just different language for the same thing. The slight difference is that all closed captions are subtitles, but subtitles can be closed captions or open captions. So if you've got, for example, burnt-in subtitles where it's part of the video, you see a lot of that on like TikTok, for example. Those are subtitles and open captions because they can't be turned off. Why do I see double subtitling on videos sometimes? It's really confusing. So this is a fairly common experience, and it's because of what we just said with the closed captions and open captions. Sometimes you'll have both the burnt-in set, which is the open captions, and the closed captions showing at the same time. This might be because you put both up because the open captions are more accessible and the closed captions are better for search engine optimization. It might be that you created the video with burnt-in subtitles and the platform you put it on has created an automatically generated AI set. And so then it's playing both at the same time. And this is also why it's important to, if you are making subtitles, also upload the digital ones. Because if you've got the burnt-in ones and the AI ones are different, then that becomes confusing. And for me as a user, if I've got a video with burnt-in subtitles, the digital ones will show on top of it. And so if I can't turn them off for any reason, then I'm stuck with the digital ones, which might be inaccessible. So yeah, just if you're making the subtitles, do both. They both got benefits, but make sure that they're not overlapping. Okay. What is more accessible, open captions or closed captions? Well, mentioned earlier, open captions are available to all. So they're more accessible for a couple of reasons. Number one, anyone can see them. Number two, you don't need to ask for them. So that removes that social barrier of separating yourself from the rest of the audience. You get to be part of the audience along with everyone else and still access it without doing anything different. So for the best practice option for accessibility is open captions. Is there best practice for font size, style, and color of subtitles? And can I control this? So yes, there is best practice for this. We mentioned earlier the bottom 20% of the screen. And so you want the two lines to fit that. I can't give you an exact point size in terms of the font because different programs will interpret size numbers differently. I have one program which can read a subtitle as being size 14, and that's big enough. And then if I put that in a different program, that same size is size 50. So it's completely up to the different platforms. So you just need to make sure it fits that 20%. The font should be Arial or Tiresias, which is spelled Tiresias. That is a free font provided by the RNID, which is the Royal National Institute, sorry, not RNID, RNIB, which is the Royal National Institute for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And that is a font that has been specifically designed for legibility. So it's free to download and you can use that. The color should be plain white or a yellowy orange on a black background. These are best practice. They're not hard and fast rules. The key thing here is that it has to be legible. If you want to use your branded font, branded colors, that's fine as long as it's legible. Don't use a font that is, you know, a weird handwritten or what they one from Windings. Don't use Windings for your subtitle font. If you never came across it, Winding kind of just was a peculiar set of symbols, which were completely illegible. So yes, make sure it's legible. What software can you use to add subtitles to a video? Now, there's a whole range of platforms out there. Subtitling is a really big set. And you can use whichever one you like. As long as the text is formatted accessibly and it's legible, you can do what you like. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but some suggestions here. So there's some affordable or free platforms, which is YouTube. YouTube has got a built-in subtitle platform. There's Subtitle Edit, which has got different programs on Mac and Windows. The Mac one, I think it's a £10 one-off cost, and the Windows one is free and it's an open source software. Or there's CapCut, which I believe is an app that a lot of people use for TikTok. The professional platforms are Easy Titles, WinCaps or Quantum. These are used by professional subtitlers who do subtitling day in, day out. They've got, you know, license costs, they've got lots of ongoing fees, but they have a lot more features, shortcuts, and tools to support that professional workflow. So there's lots of platforms. They've all got their own features. They've got their own way of interfacing. And they've also got different levels of peer support and product support from other users and the company. So when it comes to deciding which platform to use, think about what are your needs and do some research. How do I add subtitles for live training and webinars? So for live subtitles that you create with recording is only good afterwards. You can't do that during the recording. If you want to make a live event subtitled, a live event accessible, that's a whole different skill set, which is live subtitling, which is what our lovely STTR Nicola is doing today. So live subtitles are typed in real time during an event by a speech-to-text reporter, or STTR. They use a specialized keyboard, which is a phonetic keyboard rather than a usual QWERTY keyboard, or they might use a respeaking techniques. So these STTRs are specifically qualified. It's a very difficult skill set, and I wouldn't recommend doing this DIY. The StageTexts that StageText work with can type up to 300 words a minute at 98% accuracy. It's a very niche skill. People often think it's being done automatically, but actually they're faster, more accurate than automatic subtitles. So in terms of booking, speech-to-text reported, there are providers out there. StageText do that as well for the arts. So we've got a booking inquiry form on our website. To give you an idea of costs, as a generic cost, a 1-hour webinar will be around £200 plus VAT, but there's a lot of variables, and so the cost can vary significantly depending on your requirements, the technical complexity, how long it is, you know, where it is. So I definitely recommend getting in touch with StageText or one of the other providers and having a discussion to scope out, what your needs are. Because it's not the kind of thing where with subtitles, you can take your time to make sure you got it right. When it's live, it's live. What is the difference between automated and real-time subtitles, live subtitles? So as I just described, live subtitles are created by a speech-to-text reporter. In terms of the differences, live subtitles can put speaker names. AI subtitles can sometimes do this, but not always. Live subtitles have the benefit of speech-to-text reporters being familiar with the material. That's either from doing similar events in the past or from having prep. So they might get the presentation, they might get speaker notes ahead of time so they can be familiar with it. There are some AI platforms emerging which do let you put in a glossary of terms, which I think is really a step forward, but it's not the norm yet. When you've got a Zoom webinar, you can't upload that glossary of terms. Live subtitles can handle noisier environments better, but not perfectly. That is not licensed to just give a noisy audio feed. You want to minimize noise as much as possible, but because the live subtitler is a human, humans are still better at hearing than machines are at the moment. In terms of auto subtitles, they can be easier to they can be easier to implement. A lot of platforms have them integrated, so like Zoom, if you want to use the auto subtitles, you just turn them on. It's easy. You don't need to book anything in advance. But if they don't have them integrated, then you're scuppered. They can also be turned on at any time. So even if you haven't planned for it, you can turn them on right away and there's no prep needed. But in short, live subtitles are higher quality and they're more accurate. And this is better for the viewer because it's that quality and accuracy that makes them accessible. Auto subtitles are convenient and affordable for the organization, but they've got lower accuracy, which makes them inaccessible. So really, what it kind of comes down to when you're weighing up these options, the question is, whose benefit are you putting them on for? Are you putting them on to be accessible and accurate for the audience, or are you putting them on to be convenient and affordable for the organization? Just something to bear in mind. Can live captions be saved and accessed for later? This depends on the platform. So on Zoom, you can save an STTR transcript. Otherwise, the STTR software that they use to output can save, but this needs to be set up in advance. So I would always ask ahead of the event for the transcript. However, even if you have got this transcript, it's not always straightforward to use these after the event. So as you know, subtitles are timed to a time code of the video. You say at 3 seconds in, you have this line. And the lines are broken very strategically, as we discussed earlier. With live subtitles, they're typed out word by word, and it comes out in continuous prose. So they don't always split in, what would be best practice for subtitles when exporting that transcript. And they may or may not have time codes. And if they do have time codes, those time codes are often compared to when the live subtitler started their program rather than when the recording started. So you'd have to do lots of jigging around. So when you get a transcript, you can use it as a base to create subtitles from. But I wouldn't necessarily advise this, especially if you're not practiced at subtitling, as starting from an existing transcript can make it easier to kind of skim through and miss things, make errors, exclude sound labels, rather than when you're creating them from scratch and you're fully engaged. What is the process to ensure that subtitles meet accessibility standards? So follow the best practice we looked at earlier, use that free resource from the StageText website. But if you're reviewing a file and you want to ensure it's accessible, there isn't really a formal checklist because it is a bit of an art. But the key things that tend to trip people up are sound labels. So have the music and sound effects been labeled if the sound effects are not evident? Speaker names, have off-screen speakers been labeled? And verbatim, is it word for word or have bits been summarized or shortened? We actually also have a free online training on our resource page, which is a series of videos going over subtitle best practice a bit more. It was made during lockdown, so some of it is a little bit dated, but there's still lots of really useful information in there. How do I deal with multiple languages or dialects? So remember the primary objective of creating subtitles. You're filling in the gaps to ensure that deaf audiences have the same experience as your hearing audiences. So what do your hearing audiences experience? Do they experience someone saying, speaking in Japanese or Nigerian dialect? No, they experience everything being said. They may not understand it, but they experience it. If they're familiar, then they will understand it a bit more. But crucially, whether or not they understand what's being said depends on them as a viewer and not you as a subtitler. And so you want to make sure that you're doing the same for your deaf audiences. So best practice is to subtitle verbatim, representing what is being said, ideally in the language that's used for that language, such as Japanese or Korean. If it's not possible to use the actual alphabet for that, then spell it phonetically. If you can't follow what's being said, then ideally contact the speaker themselves and ask them for a transcript and rough time codes, which you can then use to time it. You may want to collaborate with them to ensure the subtitles still follow all the best practice on line breaks, because obviously if you're not familiar, you can't check it. And again, this is why it's important to ask at the very start, what did you say? And write down anything that's in another language that you're not familiar with. I'll just let the interpreter switch over. Great. Sorry, where was I? If you can't work with the original speaker, then find somebody who does have experience or expertise in the language or dialect. If you've got no luck with any of that, then as a last resort, you can put, speaking in whatever language it is. But bear in mind, this is the last resort because it is taking away information from deaf people that the hearing people are getting. How are cultural references, idioms, or jargon best handled in subtitles? This is the same as the previous question, keep it verbatim for all the same reasons. Your job as a subtitler isn't to add extra information or context, it's to make the content of the video accessible. If the content is confusing to people who don't have the context, let them be confused. The subtitles aren't there to fill in context, it's there to communicate the same information. How are special effects or non-verbal sounds represented in the subtitles? A couple of different styles. You can either do all capitals or lowercase. You can do square brackets or round brackets. Whatever you do, keep it consistent. And those labels have to be within brackets. That's what separates them from speech. When it comes to actually describing them, describe what they are within the story. So for example, I remember years ago hearing about how sound effect artists create the sound of crunching snow, and it's like a food pipe which they squelch, and that's what makes the sound effect. When you're subtitling that, you wouldn't subtitle it as food pipe squelching, you'd subtitle it as snow crunching. So subtitle the sound within that story. In terms of the format, as we said before, you start with the thing that's making the sound and then what it's doing to produce the sound. So you've got tap, the thing doing it, and dripping, the thing that it's doing. Some things to avoid. Avoid the word sounds, music, or noise. These don't tell me anything about the sound that's being made. So windy sounds, how is that any more informative than wind blowing or just wind? Upbeat music, what did music tell me about that? Scuffling noise doesn't add anything more than just scuffling. So those are the things to avoid, and keep it succinct. Again, you don't want the sound of snow falling off the roof and landing on the floor. That's too much. It's too descriptive, it's too interpretive. Keep it simple. Can anyone subtitle videos? Technically, yes, but that's not really the question. The question is, are the subtitles that they create accessible and accurate? And also, are they timely? As in, do they get to you on time? If it's a short social media video, which is, under a few minutes, 30 seconds, yeah, easy enough for anyone to knock that out. If it's a 2-hour webinar involving complicated topics, you really should book in a professional and experienced subtitler. It will be a bit of an ordeal for your social media manager to subtitle a 2-hour lecture about 18th century Italian paintings. So it's better to hire someone who can do that quickly because you've got better things to do with your time. And also, if you're then reviewing that long video, it's 2 hours every time to make sure the subtitles are accurate. So when it comes to best practice, the best practice for access is always to use a professional subtitler. But if it's a short video and you've got that awareness of best practice, you've got review processes in place, then yes, you can look at subtitling those in-house. Last question now, and then we'll get on to the Q&A. What's the cost associated with subtitling services? And this depends. It depends where you go and what service you use. At StageText, we've got theatre captioning, live subtitling, and digital subtitling. And they've all got completely different price structures because they're completely different services, different skills, different scenarios. And so there's also all sorts of subtitling companies out there. But to give you some ballpark figures so you kind of know what to expect, when it comes to the StageText subtitling service, if it's a short 10-minute video, it will be £60 to £75. If it's a half an hour video, 120, 150. And if it's a big 2-hour long recording, then it's, £500, £600. All of those prices don't include VAT, as I think most organizations can claim back VAT if they're. Most organizations that are MPOs will probably be charities that can claim back VAT. Like with any service, there's a range of providers with a range of prices, but you all know how much time and skill goes into subtitling, so you do get what you pay for. So we'll go on now to the Q&A. Thanks for listening. That was a lot of information through it. I hope you found it useful. Roberta, I'm gonna.
Thank you so much, Oliver. That was an amazing webinar. That was brilliant. We have had a bumper crop of questions come through for you.
Okay, great.
So I'm glad you're taking a drink because you're going to need it. We have got some fantastic questions. So one person is asking, in multilingual pieces, should subtitles be translated to one language, or do you put exactly what is said? And I think we covered this already.
Yeah. What was that first part? In multilingual. What,
multilingual pieces.
Pieces. Yes.
Should
So
subtitles be translated to one language, or do you put exactly what is said?
Put exactly what is said. If you're not translating the audio, don't translate the subtitles.
Okay, fantastic. Another person's asking, could you please go over again what you should do if the audio is grammatically incorrect? What should you do if the audio doesn't make sense when it is read? Yes.
Follow what the audio is. So if somebody says, let me think of a grammatically incorrect line to say. If somebody says, I go to the theatre, write that in the subtitles.
Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of people are asking about ums, ahs, that type of thing. Should they be included as well?
Yes, very good question. So again, there's a nuance here. If somebody says, ums or ah, they've got these kind of signature pauses, you can put a couple in because it gives a little bit of the flavor of the character, but you don't need to put every single one. If there's an and then a long pause, then you could have an to indicate what's happening, but you don't need to put every single one in each sentence, to be honest. Okay. That's the one case where it's okay to shorten things.
Yeah, so someone asking a very similar one about stuttering, non-intentional stuttering. So what would you do in that case?
Yeah, so stuttering, so it's a similar case where you can you kind of want to represent the character of what's being said. And so you would kind of have the bit that's being stuttered, then a hyphen, and then what's being repeated. However, there is a kind of a consideration needed here for the speaker. If they've got a stuttering condition, you may want to check with them, how comfortable are they with that being represented in the subtitle, because the last thing you want is to, offend somebody or upset somebody. So yes, you can put it in, but double check.
Yes, that's a great answer. Someone else is asking, what should we do when dialogue overlaps, or when there's more than one person speaking at the same time, or it's really fast moving, like it is sometimes in modern dramas?
Yeah, so when people are overlapping, that's a very difficult one. You can use the hyphens. So when you've got multiple speakers, when you are saying the same thing. If there's lots of people all speaking at the same time, then there you've got to kind of pick out what is the thing that's most easily heard. Because often when pieces are overlapping, it's because you're not meant to hear every single sentence. You're meant to hear the noise as a whole, with maybe some bits that are more significant. So identify those significant parts, and you may want to work with the artist who created the video to say what is the bit that's meant to be heard, or you can just kind of have a label that says overlapping voices if it's just noise for the purpose of noise.
Fantastic answer. And similarly, someone's asking, in animations, that maybe the character's lips aren't moving, should you use the character name?
That's a good question.
A little think about that one.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about what I've seen and what they've done. I think so it's kind of thinking about how obvious is it that it's that character speaking.
Yeah.
If you've got 10 different characters on screen, none of them whose mouths are moving, and you've got someone speaking, then yeah, you want to label it. If they're the only character on screen and they've just been talking, then no. If it's, the cliche where it zooms into their head and it's their thoughts, then you wouldn't need to there.
That makes loads of sense. We've had so many more questions come in, but I don't know if we have much more time to do them because we've only got 3 minutes left.
That's all right. If you want to, we can compile the questions that we have left over, and I'm happy to answer them over email.
So apologies to everyone who I didn't get to ask a question, but there's been some absolutely fantastic ones coming in, including ones around ideas for creative captioning for live theatres, and I thought that one would be really interesting to get to, but we just didn't make it. So if you want to proceed to the final slides, Oliver, that would be really handy.
So we've got some contacts for StageText. So my email is oliver@stagetext.org. I'm always happy to answer questions. We've got Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We've got a link on there for our resources. If you go to the website, which is stagetext.org, there's a venues section, and under that is some free resources for you. And then we've got the Digital Culture Network contacts as well. I'll pass that over to Roberta.
Thank you, Oliver. Feel free to reach out to us if you would like to get some support on this topic, or any of the other specialisms that our tech champions have. You can find out more details on our website, digitalculturenetwork.org.uk. Be sure to follow us on ACE Twitter. ACDCN on Twitter, was used to be called Twitter, which is now X, and also on the LinkedIn, and we've also got a lovely YouTube channel. You will receive a survey after this event. It'd be really useful for us if you could fill that in. Other than that, thank you ever so much for coming, everyone, today. It's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Oliver.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It's great to have so much interest in subtitling. As a user, I love it when there's more people subtitling.
Yay for subtitling. I'll see you all next time, everybody. To keep up to date with our events, sign up for our newsletter. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.
Bye.